And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another disappointed episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers drop a very winnable game in Champaign to the Illinois Fighting Illini, 73-71. It was Illinois' first Big Ten win of the season. Indiana drops to 5-4 in sole possession of sixth place in the Big Ten Conference. And really, if you were looking just at the numbers for how these two teams play coming into this game, for what would be the formula for Illinois to get this win, forcing Indiana into a lot of turnovers and Indiana not shooting well from the free throw line would have been kind of the simple formula based on how Illinois likes to play. And that's exactly what happened, as Indiana turned it over on about 26% of their possessions, far, far more than they'd been doing coming into the game. And then obviously we know how many free throws the Hoosiers missed. They missed 13. And in a game when you miss 13 free throws and lose by 2, I mean, literally everything else could be the same. And if you just make a couple of free throws, if your senior Colin Hartman steps up and knocks down a couple of them, if anybody else can hit a few free throws, the result is different. But tonight, Indiana loses by 2 as the free throws don't fall and the turnovers kept coming. So congratulations to Illinois on their first Big Ten victory of the season. I'm your host, Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni, and we will break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Let's start tonight's show as we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for the banner moment in this game, I'm going to take you back all the way to the very beginning of the game, because it was by far the best sequence of basketball that Indiana had all night, which was basically the first 4 minutes of the game where the Hoosiers jumped out to a 12-4 lead. Juwan Morgan scored or assisted on all of the baskets. In fact, you can take that out to the first 14 points of the game. Juwan Morgan scored or assisted on all of those points. And I thought it was a really great start for Indiana in a tough environment against a team that obviously plays a different style of defense. Indiana didn't practice during their day off since the Maryland win. They just did some film work, did a walkthrough. And so I think it would have been, I don't think anybody would have been shocked if they came out and struggled a little bit. But Indiana really came out and played well at the start of this game, took control, and really kind of maintained control through the end of the first half when they had a 38-32 lead, and it was all based on how they started. And it was funny because in Archie's pregame comments, he talked about how, against a team like Illinois that does something so different, you might struggle in the beginning, but you would hope that as the game gets longer, you would get more comfortable. Well, unfortunately, that didn't happen, because at times it almost looked like Indiana got less comfortable as the game continued on, and we'll talk about the struggles that the guards had. But the way Indiana came out, and obviously the way that Juwan Morgan put the team on his shoulders and led them on the road, that's exactly what you want to see. And Juwan, had another spectacular game. Unfortunately, no one else really stepped up to help him from the scoring column. But those first 4 minutes were the best Indiana looked all night. It gave them a lead that they were able to nurse for a while. But unfortunately, Illinois took control at the start of the second half, and then they never really gave it back en route to their victory. All right, our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based T-shirt and apparel company that is by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. Why should you check out their website, HoosierProud.com? Well, here are 3 reasons. Number 1, they have great designs. So they have our officially, it's not officially licensed Assembly Call gear, I guess, but it is our official Assembly Call gear. They have officially licensed Indiana gear, basketball T-shirts, football T-shirts, soccer-themed T-shirts. They've got it all. And they also have a lot of really cool designs that are inspired by unique elements of the Hoosier State. And so check them out, HoosierProud.com, for all those different designs. Number 2, they're very philanthropic, and they support Indiana-based charities. So if you want to support Indiana-based charities, buy some T-shirts at Hoosier Proud, and a portion of the proceeds will go to those Indiana-based charities, and you can find out what the charities are at their website. And number 3, they are very generous with Assembly Call listeners. So when you go there, when you make a purchase, you will get 15% off of your entire order. Just use the promo code Assembly so they know that we sent you, ASSEMBLY, and you will get 15% off of your entire order. Check them out at HoosierProud.com. All right, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. And we will start with Andy Bottoms and his Bottoms line, brought to us by iustore.shop.
Well, first, I'd like to congratulate the Big Ten and the officials by ruining their product, by having these games so close to one another in these short turnarounds. Both teams looked really tired at times, and I think the quality of play suffered as a result, in part of the quick turnaround and in part because of the officiating in the second half, when both teams went over 7 minutes without making a field goal, because I don't know that many were even attempted during that stretch. But I mean, all that being said, I mean, I'm sure we'll touch on the officiating, which was for IU to get called for 19 fouls in the second half after 6 in the first half, because obviously they were so much more aggressive in the second half than the first defensively. Even in the face of all of that, this is a game that IU should have won, but their guards turned the ball over 10 times. They missed 13 free throws, including a number of, the ones that probably hurt as much as any were the ones in the first half that really could have been a double-digit lead at the half. And I think that, coupled with the slow start in the second half, in some ways decided the game. I mean, it was a case for me of, all right, well, you felt pretty good to be up 6 in some regard. You kind of talk yourself into feeling good about that. And the problem was, then you come out and say, all right, well, get off to a hot start, push the lead up to 10, kind of put some doubt in Illinois. Well, the exact opposite happened. They came out really hot out of the locker room. IU wasn't, locked in defensively in a way that they were in the first half. And, that really allowed Illinois to get some confidence and allowed them to get comfortable. And really, IU picked up a bunch of fouls and really just kind of started that whole trend during that stretch. So to me, that was, that was largely it. Was really kind of where the game turned, not being able to be up more at the half and compounding that by really giving it away at the beginning of the second. And, just a lot of, not a lot of positive performances to talk about outside of Juwan. And I'm sure we'll talk about the guards, but I thought they were just, got rattled way too easily. And for a team with as many veterans are on the team, I thought they got some of the worst performances, or some of the quietest performances, at least from the veterans. And in a road environment against the team, no matter how many Big Ten games they've won, it's just not the recipe that this team needs to succeed on short rest. And in I don't know, must win is probably too strong, but I don't expect to be fielding questions in the near future about IU's tournament hopes. So I think this has probably put an end to that, at least.
I'm going to ask you some on Thursday just to troll you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just go ahead and do that.
All right. It is time for Tonsoni time, as the coach Brian Tonsoni is here filling in for Ryan Phillips. And that is brought to us by the great new podcast, Sports Talk with Tonsoni, which I hope you're listening to. Coach, your opening thoughts on tonight's Indiana loss.
Well, I'll second what Andy said with the separation. My son and I always talk basketball, that when you have a chance to separate from an opponent, you need to do that. And the missed free throws and some of the missed opportunities in the first half kept it at a 6-point game. If we could have gotten it to a 10, 11, 12, maybe we break their spirits a little bit. And we gave them a chance to regroup by having it only be 6, and they obviously did a good job of adjusting at halftime. I thought the first half was enjoyable and good basketball. I thought we were locked in on their sets. We lost Frazier a little bit late in the half that allowed it to be somewhat close, but credit to that young man in making some plays. But I thought it was an enjoyable half. Ball moved. We were finding cutters. We were being aggressive. We weren't allowing that pressure to really dictate what we were doing. And it was a 38-32, I think was the score. I know it was 6, and you felt comfortable. And then all of a sudden, when the second half started, you could just see things start to switch. And so my takeaway is that this team has always had some deficiencies, and they're going to rear its head at some point. And at other points, those deficiencies are going to be masked or covered up by good hard play like the last couple home games. So this is just a coin flip team right now, and we should enjoy Juwan Morgan and Zach McRoberts for the complete play that they bring every night.
Absolutely. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. I mean, really, the blame for this goes to Juwan Morgan, right? Because he only played 31 minutes. I mean, he sits out 9 minutes. He was plus 14, at least according to the box score that I'm looking at. And Indiana loses this game by 2. So clearly the answer is Juwan Morgan needs to play 40 minutes, and he's responsible for this.
That checks out.
Yeah. No, but okay. I mean, we have some negative stuff to talk about. We need to talk about the guards, but I do want to linger on Juwan just a bit because we can't take performances like this for granted. He has 28 points. He's 12 of 14. And I even thought that there was a stretch there in the second half where I don't know if Indiana forgot about him, but I thought there was a stretch where we weren't getting him the ball enough. A guy that's as effective as him. And I think there was a play where he got a rebound and just decided to take it himself and was like, screw this. I'm just going to take it and go get a bucket when we really needed it. So, he has 28 points. He also adds 8 rebounds. The offensive rebound that he had near the beginning of the game is one of the best offensive rebounds I think I've ever seen. I mean, that was a man's offensive rebound. He also had 3 assists. So another really, really good game for him. I almost felt like it could have been more, though. I mean, do you guys agree that there was kind of a stretch there in the second half? And again, part of that was just, I think the guards were struggling so much to get us into anything and to have any kind of semblance of rhythm offensively, and credit Illinois to that too. But, you saw late in the game, Archie calls a timeout. They go right into Juwan. He scores. Kind of wish there had been a little bit more of that. I almost felt like maybe we left some opportunities on the table with Juwan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking through the play-by-play now. He made a layup with 10:42 left and didn't shoot again until there was 1 minute and 3 seconds left, and that includes free throws.
That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, part of it was hard. I mean, the game had no flow at a certain point, and I agree, but there were times the guards couldn't hold on to the ball long enough to get it into the front court to even get it to him. And then you just had possessions that are just meandering on the perimeter, dribbling for 20 seconds and then trying to do whatever. So yeah, I mean, that definitely missed opportunities in terms of getting him the ball. And I just thought in a game that, that first half really weren't a ton of fouls called. I thought there was a pretty good flow to it. And I think, with all the fouls on both teams, I mean, to be fair, Illinois ended up getting called for a number of fouls in the second half as well. I mean, there's just no flow to the game whatsoever. And I think it allowed IU to easily get away from what was most successful, which is not an excuse by any means. It was certainly a missed opportunity. And then, I think there were times when Archie's trying to, shuffle him out to prevent him from getting into any further foul trouble, which I think limited his minutes in the first half as much as anything. He got more rest in the first half than we've seen in a lot of games, so far this year. And then, came out and picked up a couple relatively quickly in the second half. But yeah, I mean, he was, both halves, the guy that really did it. I think he scored about half the points in the second half, and definitely will lament not finding ways to get him the ball more during that, 9-minute stretch.
Well, and it also should be noted, he missed 5 free throws, which was more than anybody else. And for a guy that is a good shooter and that is being counted on so much for this team, he does bear some responsibility there for, he just makes 3 of those and has a 6 for 8 night from the field. Indiana wins the game. So, that should be noted too. Any other thoughts from you, Coach, on the performance from Juwan and maybe some other things Indiana could have done to get him the ball even more?
Well, I think they did a great job. Again, in the first half, they were against the pressure. They were looping Johnson underneath the point guard and then bringing Johnson up, and he was slipping a ball screen, and they were able to get that ball to the middle and then attack the rim. And they even did that with Hartman a little bit. And then Illinois adjusted and went to some zone, and we were able to find him in that zone. In the second half, the pressure was so good on the guards that we weren't able to get that action anymore, and the ball stuck on a side. And again, I don't know what Archie has to get that ball off the side. Maybe there should have been an adjustment at that time. All the time, as a coach, you second guess what happened. But that coincided a little bit with his foul trouble too. That he went out, and sometimes you lose the flow when your go-to guy goes out for a little bit of time. But yeah, the second half, I don't think it was a Juwan issue. I think it was just an offensive issue of not being able to find him and going backwards versus the pressure. But what a great year he's having, and it's just a pleasure to watch game in and game out.
Boy, it sure is. I mean, he's been absolutely terrific. All right, coming up on the Assembly Call, I will point out tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. We will go inside the numbers. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, and we are breaking down Indiana's disappointing 73-71 loss to the Illinois Fighting Illini. Again, the Hoosiers missed 13 free throws and lose by 2. This is, when we look back on this season, this is going to be one of the bigger missed opportunities for Indiana, not just to get a Big Ten win, but especially a win on the road that would have been so important for this team and for this program, but they're not able to do it. And for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed, I want to take you back late in the second half. Obviously, Illinois, Andy, as you mentioned, they took the lead early, or they didn't necessarily take the lead early in the second half, but they kind of built momentum in the second half. And Indiana was actually able, after Illinois tied it at 45, Morgan goes to the bench, and Indiana scores 6 straight points. And it was the seniors. Robert Johnson hit a layup, Colin Hartman hit a layup, Josh Newkirk hit a couple of free throws. It was one of the better sequences of offense for Indiana in the second half. They go up 6. Illinois immediately comes right back and scores 6 straight points to erase that lead and kind of regain the momentum. And then they ended up taking the lead, and they kind of nursed that 3 to 5 point lead there for a little while. But it was 64-61. And Robert Johnson makes a beautiful pass and finds a cutting Devontae Green, and he's basically wide open for a little bunny, and he just tries to be kind of too cute on a layup, or if he just catches the ball and shoots it up properly, he probably makes it, but he kind of tried to spin it in. He misses it, so it's still 64-61. Illinois goes down and scores to push it up to 66-61 now with 3:20 to go. And I thought that was a big swing, because if Devontae is able to connect there, it makes it 64-63. It's a one-possession game. You cut into some of that momentum, and it was so hard for Indiana to find good, open, easy looks that you just had to convert those. And I thought, and this can lead us into a conversation about Devontae Green, because on the one hand, you could make the argument that he was Indiana's best guard tonight. He was the most adept at actually handling the ball and breaking some of the pressure. He did have some nice passes and ended up with 5 assists. And on a night when few people shot well from the line, he was 6 of 9, which I guess qualifies as passable on a night like tonight. But then, of course, he has, makes the terrible pass at the end of the game, obviously cost Indiana possession a few minutes or a few possessions prior, when he just completely lost his dribble. So it was a typical kind of up and down game for Devontae. And I thought that play in particular, just trying to be a little bit too fancy on a layup instead of just catching it and shooting it is kind of indicative of the problem that he has. And this could have been kind of a shining night for him, but too many of those plays still find their way into his game, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only shot he took where it felt like he was under control is the one that he made off that nice look from Morgan, hit it right around the free throw line.
Yeah.
And but if you think about his other shots, they were either the product of having dribbled around far too long, the missed shot that you talked about, all ones that were just, frenetic, out of control type plays. And the reality was, though, that he was doing a better job in a lot of ways than Newkirk or Al Durham of really breaking the press. So it's kind of a, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're Archie Miller, I mean, what do? You struggled to find anybody who could consistently, handle the ball and do some of those things. But then it was almost as if you could have had Devontae get the ball across the half court and then substitute someone in at the half court line who could then run the rest of the possession, which sadly is not something you can do. Although I'm not sure these officials would have noticed, but he's just so frustrating to watch. And I know people compare him to Troy Williams. Like, I find him more frustrating to watch because you see parts of it. And when he plays under control, he could be really effective. He just doesn't play under control enough and hasn't found a way yet to kind of rein in what he wants to do. And even at times defensively was, really good in the first half, but kind of got away from that in the second half. And so you see those flashes really on both ends of the floor. And I just can't imagine. I struggle to know what it would be like to coach him, just because I feel like you just see these times where it's like, well, I have to play this guy because look at what he can do. And here's this, these 3 plays where he was fantastic. And then you look at these others where it's like he made something that was so simple, so much more difficult than it needed to be by over dribbling or not making a simple play. And it just is it's a difficult spot for this team. I think in an ideal world, you're not in that scenario where you feel like you kind of have no choice but to play somebody who can be that erratic. But with this team, that's just kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, and I mean, where else were you going to go but Devontae Green? Because Robert Johnson was loose with his handle, and he's never been the kind of guy who, is going to be a press breaker and has those kind of, guard chops. You're really hoping that Josh Newkirk is going to be that guy. But look, Josh has played better recently. But there are some games, and I don't know whether it's just a matchup or just, kind of random chance, because sometimes he doesn't quite come ready to play. But there's some games that he just can't be on the floor because he's really doing nothing positive. And this was one of those games. And to Archie's credit, he didn't, force him out there for longer than he should have been out there. He only played 12 minutes. Only Al Durham played fewer minutes of guys who got in the game. He played 11. And so, I mean, I think Archie kind of had to go with Devontae, but I mean, Coach, you kind of mentioned this earlier. I mean, this is a game where road environment against this type of team, you needed your guards to step up. You got what you needed from Morgan. You got what you needed from McRoberts for the most part. But the guards just were not able to hold up their end of the bargain tonight.
After seeing Illinois turn over Michigan State 25 times in the previous game, the thought for me was it's going to be a guards game, and we needed to have really solid production from the guards, and we did not have that tonight. Robert hit a few shots, and Devontae did some nice things at times, but Newkirk struggled to guard. Devontae struggled to guard Frazier late in the first half, and that's just frustrating. And it goes back to your conversation about Morgan, that guards initiate offense, and if guards are getting zipped up on with the pressure up high or on the side and can't beat that pressure, then there's really not a whole lot that Archie, he can call plays, but if you can't get into plays, that is a problem. And our guard play, when we lose, our guard play is bad, and when we win, our guard play is average or above average, and that's something that has to be fixed, down the road. But Devontae did some nice things, but that last pass was just indicative of Devontae. He made the right read. There were two reads there. Johnson was open for the three, but Morgan was open, and it was just a bad executed pass. It was just a physical error. But those plays need to be made in the Big Ten, and it's just indicative of where we're at.
I've been predicting a Robert Johnson game-winning three-pointer for years now. This was the game. He just didn't get the ball.
He was in his spot on the wing.
He was there ready to do
it. With Josh, with me, one of the plays that stood out coming out, this was one of the plays that really enabled Illinois to play so well at the beginning of the half. I mean, I think he turned the ball over and then he shot a three as if the shot clock was running out, or as if the ball was engulfed in flames, and just hurled it toward the basket like an elongated Keith Smart baseline jumper, except from 3-point range, falling into the bench. I'm like, what are you doing? And I think in all honesty, that's sometimes a team that really pressures you so much. I think you get guys in a situation where it's like, I've broken it, I'm just going to shoot it before something else bad happens. And it felt like that kind of shot. Yeah, I just thought he really, really struggled. And the one, he throws it into the crowd and he's looking at McRoberts like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you doing? I don't understand. So it was, definitely a really rough night for him. And I thought Al kind of had a couple nice passes in the first half. Was a little bit surprised he didn't play more in the second, but he certainly had turnover issues. And I don't, it was one of those where there really wasn't anywhere to turn. And because Robert Johnson isn't, the guy, the kind of press breaker that you mentioned before, it almost turned into the same thing for him in the second half, where he didn't touch the ball a whole lot, because it was just the simple act of getting the ball across half court and getting into some kind of functional offense was such a challenge that, guys who really rely on others to feed them the ball in a good spot, which I would put Rob in that category, just like Juwan. He can create a little bit off the dribble, but not a ton. I mean, those guys really suffered as a result of that.
Yeah, and speaking of Rob, I thought there was a sequence at the end of the first half that was kind of indicative of his night. It was 35-29, and Brian, you made a good point that Indiana really should have been up more. They should have had a bigger lead going into halftime. Well, Rob drains a three to make it 38-29, and so it looks like, we may go in with a 9 or maybe even a 10 or 11-point lead if we can then get the ball back and go down and score again. On the very next possession, on defense, Rob just leaves Lucas wide open in the corner for a three-pointer. He just slid right down. Rob, kind of wasn't paying attention, and it's a wide open three-pointer. So he kind of gave it and then took it away. But that kind of awareness, those kind of little things, are the stuff that you need to win road games. And I just thought, Robert has been much better recently. I mean, they flashed up that graphic that the last 4 or 5 games he's been averaging 17 points. And again, a game like this, you need more than 7 shot attempts from him. And you need him to be able to find a way to get some more offense and to be able to make better defensive decisions than that. So while I think for the most part Rob has been much better in Big Ten play, this is probably going to go down as one of his poor performances of the season.
Well, what IU needs is a guy to beat people to the rim. Watching a lot of college basketball for the bracketology stuff, you see a lot of players, a lot of guards that catch and get to the rim. The Marquette kid today, Howard, had 24 in the first half from the guard position. Without that, there's a lot of pressure on executing offensive plays to score. It is difficult for Indiana to score because we are limited from a skill position of shooting, of ball handling. I think Chronic Hoosier had a great tweet about the lack of shooting and ball handling at Indiana is so not Indiana, or something to that extent. It was a fantastic tweet.
Unconscionable, I think, is the word that was used.
Beyond my vocabulary, obviously. And I'm a teacher. That's said. But, yeah, that the guards don't pay attention to detail enough for my liking. To take care of the ball, dribbling and falling down into a turnover. throwing the ball to the front row without it wasn't even a pass that could have done something. Getting the ball stolen when you just move the ball. I think Devontae or someone had. There were times when you just bring it across your body and you're not tough enough, and the ball gets, and let alone the bad shots. So our guard play is just an area of concern.
Yep. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, breaking down Indiana's 2-point loss to Illinois. It's time to go inside the numbers. A few numbers that jump out to me. Look, obviously the free throw shooting, 16 of 29. We've talked about that. We talked about the turnovers. Indiana with 18 turnovers for the game, 26.2% of possessions. Illinois came into the game turning opponents over 24% of the time, and that was 4th or 5th in the country. So Indiana was even worse than that. So those are obviously the two stats on the bad side that really jump out. I think on the positive side, Indiana really did a nice job on the defensive glass. This is an Illinois team. They're 4th or 5th in offensive rebounding as well, getting well over 35, 36% of their missed shots. Tonight, Indiana only allowed them to rebound 21% of their misses. That equated to a total of 6 offensive rebounds. So that job done on the defensive glass was a really nice job again. And then Indiana makes 69% of their 2-point field goals. I mean, that, and obviously Juwan Morgan has a big hand in that as he takes 14 of those and makes 12. So you see what could have happened if Indiana just doesn't turn the ball over. You take away 4 or 5 of those turnovers and, turn those into 3 or 4 more attempts at 2-pointers, and you've got your difference in the game right there. So those numbers jump out to me. And then the other one is Indiana really in the first half did a nice job of sharing the ball. You're not going to beat this Illinois pressure by just dribbling around it. You've really got to move the ball, move it with the pass. Indiana did a great job of that in the first half. They had 11 assists, I believe, on 15 made field goals, something like that. They did not have an assist through the first 8 minutes of the second half. So it's no wonder that the offense struggled, that Illinois was really able to speed them up, get them out of their rhythm, because Indiana just, again, guys were trying to dribble a little bit too much, taking crazy shots, Andy, like you mentioned. So those numbers really jumped out to me. What else stands out to you, Andy, from the stat sheet?
Well, I think, to piggyback a little bit on what you said, I mean, the second half ended up with 4 assists on 10 made field goals and 11 turnovers to go with that. And that, obviously, that ratio is just indicative of the guard play and things like that. Even the turnovers, Illinois turned the ball over 14 times and it led to 11 IU points, but IU's 18 turnovers led to 22 Illinois points. So big difference there. Bench points, 29-17 Illinois. They tend to play a lot of guys, so that's not necessarily shocking, with Nichols and Lucas both getting to double figures, really were the bulk of that scoring. And to kind of circle this back to Robert Johnson, one of the numbers you didn't mention on him was 0, which is the number of free throws that he attempted in a game where everybody was fouling like crazy. That to me was an area where if he could get the ball and needed to get the ball, be aggressive, try to take the ball to the basket and see if he can get fouled in a game when, Illinois had a guy basically turn his back to the basket, mid-drive and flip the ball over his head and wait for the referees to call the contact. So I think they would have potentially blown the whistle on something like that. So I think that just for him, needed to be more aggressive when they really needed some baskets and somebody to kind of step up when things bogged down offensively. So, yeah, but I mean, I think that the turnover numbers and the free throws really encapsulate what happened tonight. It really wasn't wasn't too difficult to find numbers to point out for sure.
Well, and Justin Smith gets no free throws either, and those are 2 of Indiana's better free throw shooters, and so that might have helped that percentage a little bit. Coach, any numbers jumping out to you that we haven't mentioned yet?
As much as the turnover number bothers, again, I thought that was relatively where it might be at given what Illinois does, and the percentages you spoke were close, but you would like to limit those. The free throw shooting is just amazingly surprising, and it wasn't it wasn't Deron Davis stepping up to the line too. It's people who have shot a little bit, a lot better than 50%. I think at one time we were 12 of 24 at one point. Hartman misses 2, and we're expecting him to be a 3-point shooter, and so I don't know that that's truly who we are at the free throw line, but you can't coach missed free throws.
What do you do?
You get fouled.
Yeah, I mean,
You'll get on Twitter and everyone will be talking about how they coach free throw shooting and everything. You can shoot them and shoot them and shoot them. You could run, shoot them tired. You can scrimmage and call. But you know what? You never know who's going to get fouled in what situation after they've been playing 2 or 3 minutes or there was no timeout. I mean, you can shoot fatigued free throws in practice, but it comes down to a gut check. It is just talent and it is toughness. And what has been the problem with this team from game one to now, periods where toughness is not with us, hurt us, whether it's a game against IPFW, whether it's a second half tonight, whether it's at the free throw line. The toughness that Archie Miller wants is not there yet. And whether that comes from more practice or more recruiting years or whatever, but free throw shooting's toughness. Step to the line and make a shot.
I like it. I feel like Ryan would have said the same thing if he would have been here. All right.
Actually, he would have talked about Trevor Hoffman, but that's neither here nor there.
That's right. And he would have offered his services as the free throw coach if Indiana needs it, which maybe they do need a free throw coach right now. But, I don't know.
In all honesty, though, I mean, the ones that Devontae had with about 10 seconds left, I mean, the first one, there's like no follow through at all. He just like flipped the ball up at the basket. And it just, and some of the other guys like Hartman's really aiming his when he was up there. I mean, it's easy to sit here and talk about that stuff now.
It also might be like a virus that's just infecting everybody because if you guys
Archie did say
it was more pressure.
Archie did say it was contagious, so I think there was definitely a little bit of that in the first half. But then the flip side of that is McSwain, who's one of the worst free throw shooters on the team, stepped up there and knocked down 2 in a row at a key moment in the game.
He was 3 for 4.
Yeah,
shoot him like Freddie.
Yeah, he's gonna be shooting the technicals the next time if there's everyone calling the game. Apparently, at the current rate.
The free throw flu. Indiana is infected. All right, coming up on the assembly call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 2-point loss to Illinois. We got to talk about Zach McRoberts and Colin Hartman, 2 guys who are going in opposite directions right now. That is next here on the assembly call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, no matter how late it ends, and every Thursday night on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. You can also view all of our live broadcasts right on our homepage at assemblycall.com. I am Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni this evening as we break down Indiana's 73-71 loss to the Illinois Fighting Illini. And so let's talk about Zach McRoberts and Colin Hartman. I thought this was not one of Colin's better games in an Indiana uniform. I think he had a nice sequence in the first half where he had a nice assist and had a nice bucket. But obviously him, missing those free throws, he missed 3 free throws, a couple of them late that were killer. I thought he took a 3-pointer really early in the shot clock there late with 3 or 4 minutes to go, and Indiana really needed to get a good look. And yeah, you'd like to say that a 3-pointer from Colin Hartman is a good look when he's open, but he was 0 for 3. He has not been shooting it well at all. And I didn't think that was a good, mature decision by a senior. And maybe you could say, he's trying to show leadership, stepping up and taking a shot. But when you're shooting that well from 2-point range and you have a guy like Juwan Morgan, I just don't think that you can afford to settle for a 3-pointer right there. On the flip side, to Colin, I thought Zach McRoberts really stepped up and played well. Now, he did most of his scoring in the first half with 10 points, obviously made a couple of threes, had that early 3-pointer that really got him going. And he was actually second on the team in shot attempts, taking 7. Also had 5 rebounds, a steal, played pretty solid defense. So I thought it was encouraging to see what Zach was able to do offensively. The next step for him now is to start doing that more consistently because we've seen a few flashes from him, but then he'll go weeks without even taking a shot. So that needs to be more consistent. But look, Zach McRoberts tonight played 33 minutes. Colin Hartman played 17. And I think McRoberts playing double the minutes from Hartman right now seems about right because I feel like, just in terms of the contributions those 2 guys are giving us, McRoberts has been more consistent, more valuable, and more productive, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, if you look over the last 5 games, I think Hartman's now 3 for 19 on threes. He's taken 19 threes compared to 8 2-pointers in that stretch. And I think he's only missed 2 of the 2-pointers, and he's 3 and 19. And that play you're talking about was just one where it's like, yeah, if you're shooting it well, that's fine. And it feels like a senior trying to step up and make a big play, but just at that stage, he just has not been shooting the ball well, and how much the shoulder injury and things like that have, that 3 for 19 comes, directly on the heels of that injury. He was 4 for 8 in that Wisconsin game. Prior to that, missed the Minnesota game due to that shoulder injury, and then it's been 3 for 19. And so whether that's impacting it or not is really hard to say. Didn't look comfortable at the free throw line, as you mentioned earlier. And I thought, wow, he did some things well and contributed without scoring in the Maryland game. I didn't really feel that way tonight. It was a really rough game for him. And McRoberts, I think, fell a little bit into the same thing that so many other guys did. I mean, they couldn't get into any offense in the second half. I think what you see, and it's a little bit like what Brian talked about, we're just having, not really having somebody that can go get you a basket. I watched some of the first half of that Xavier Marquette game as well. And, Howard just, getting baskets off the dribble and doing all kinds of things. I think IU has a whole lot of guys who are very reliant on the people around them to be able to get shots and to be able to score. And the reality is that the people who can really get their own shot is probably Devontae Green. And I think you saw a little bit of that from Juwan Morgan, as you said, Jared, when he had a couple of drives where it's like he just got the rebound from one end, just dribbled to the other, knowing that he could, kind of beat his guy down there. But when you really
should do it more.
I mean, apparently, yes. But you've got so many guys, and McRoberts definitely falls into that category where it was rebound putbacks or got open threes off of action that other people were doing and attention that other people were drawing. And when you can't get into any kind of cohesive or functional offense in the second half, that renders most of your guys, I don't want to say useless, but it makes it really hard for them to score. And he fell in that category, and he, didn't score at all in the second half. And I think it's no surprise based on how that was.
Your thoughts, Coach, on McRoberts and Hartman?
Well, McRoberts just keeps impressing. And when he knocks down 10 points in the first half and taking shots when he's open, that's going to help because people are going to have to pay attention to him on those kinds of opportunities. And it's a pleasure to see a kid work so hard and then go in and do everything that he does. And you keep wondering, is it a 2-game stretch, 3-game stretch? Well, no, this is a whole season stretch. And, it's worth tuning in for the rest of the season simply to watch that young man compete at a high level. And Zach, if you could come talk to any team or anybody in any other level and share how you do it, we could have a lot of good basketball players. It is just, from a coaching standpoint, a pure joy every night watching that young man play. And, Hartman, you feel for him. I don't mind him taking threes. I know I don't want him to take a three early in the shot clock, but we need people to stretch the floor. It's going to be really hard to get the ball inside to Juwan. So, the threes sometimes, whoa, why are you taking it? But we need them, and we need them to start going down if we're going to be able to space the floor appropriately and be able to be efficient. So he's just got to, we tell people shooters have short memories. If you're a shooter and you're 3 for 19, maybe, the law of averages will equal out and you'll win a few games, but you can't stop shooting if you're a shooter because that's not going to help.
Jeff Eisenberg just sent out a tweet that said, police called after man enters Kansas basketball dorm offering free throw shooting advice. I hesitate to make any jokes about this. Hopefully, I haven't read the article, so hopefully nothing bad happened. But Martha the Mop Lady, which is a good Twitter account, at the Mop Lady, retweets it, says send him to Bloomington. So maybe it was Ryan and he got lost on his way to offering the free throw shooting advice in Bloomington. Let's talk a little bit more about Justin Smith. Ever since the Minnesota game, people have obviously had very high hopes for him and his continued breakout, and he's been a little bit up and down. And I thought tonight he looked a little bit out of sorts, looked a little bit frustrated a couple times when he got taken out of the game. I thought especially in the first half, he was not making good decisions with, when to pass it, when to go up and shoot, when to dribble, lost his dribble a couple times, and that led to turnovers. He finishes with 6 points, 3 turnovers, but I think more concerning, he doesn't have any rebounds, doesn't get any steals or blocks. And I feel like for a guy like Justin, who can be so active, who has such athletic ability, he shouldn't be able to play 20 minutes and not put up anything in those categories. And I thought this was a game where Indiana really could have used a little bump from him. I mean, Juwan Morgan needed a wingman down there. Look, Justin Smith's a freshman. Maybe it's a little bit unfair to place that expectation on him in a road game like this, but especially when you're not getting it from your guards and when he's starting and playing so many minutes, you got to get a little bit more out of him. And 6 points, nothing else, and 3 turnovers isn't really going to get it done. Andy, what did you see from Justin tonight?
Yeah, I think a couple of the turnovers are probably I didn't even realize the rebounding thing until you mentioned it, but yeah, a couple of the turnovers just really trying to do too much, drive from the 3-point line to the basket. I think he did that at least once, maybe twice. That was, for a couple of those turnovers. And it's like, that's just not what, again, kind of going back to, he's another guy who can benefit a lot from what others are doing. And the baskets that he got were largely the result of, Juwan Morgan drawing attention or somebody else and making some nice cuts down the baseline. I think, at least two, maybe all three of his baskets were off of things like that. And he may get to a point where he's the guy who can, do some of those things and create his own shot in that way, but he's just not there right now. And I thought some of what he was trying to do offensively was kind of above what he needs to be doing at this point. And then, as you said, I think that's a couple. I don't feel like he had a lot of rebounds in the Maryland game either, quite honestly. And so, yeah, that's a potentially not great trend. Yeah, he had one rebound in that Maryland game and one block. So, yeah, I think some of that, and it wasn't really in this case. It's not like he wasn't guarding LeRon Black, and there, it seemed like a matchup where there wasn't really a go-to guy for Illinois that he was, trying to stop and things like that, which is kind of funny given that he played so much against. I can't remember the guy's name on Minnesota right now. It'll come to me, I'm sure, as soon as I stop talking. Jordan Murphy. There it was. So he played really good on defense against a guy who's far more talented than anybody that Illinois was rolling out there, and so just kind of confounding. And I think you saw that with Archie a lot, where just trying to, you probably look back at lineups and just trying to figure out like what kind of combination would really work, because Hartman wasn't playing well, as we just talked about. Smith wasn't really playing all that well. So who do you really kind of roll with alongside Juwan Morgan? I think that was really difficult, because the number of guys you kind of go down and be like, hey, this guy really, stepped up and played well tonight isn't a very long list, unfortunately.
Coach, are you pleased with Justin's development so far in his freshman year?
Yeah, I think he's a true freshman, and he's being thrown into heavy minutes. You saw that early in the year, that he wasn't being totally counted on until the injury factor. And I think his problem is defense. I think I saw a tweet from Mike Miller of the Bloomington paper that Archie was really mad at him in the first 2 minutes of the second half and said something about, you're being soft on defense. So I think playing time for Justin is not necessarily an offensive issue for Coach Miller. It's a defensive issue. And there's two – there's two kinds. Sometimes it's a physical error defensively, and then there's a mental error defensively. And coaches who are defensive-minded really have a short fuse with the mental mistakes, and they have a little bit longer leash with the physical mistakes. That's probably why a Hartman goes in for Justin early in the second half if it was a defensive substitution. And I think that's maybe the toughest thing for high school kids coming into college, is to play defense against very talented teams, because the coaches usually play a zone, a trap, trying to get out and dunk the ball, or they put their star player in high school on the worst player to protect foul trouble. And other than AAU, which some people say they don't play defense, do they really guard the way coaches want to guard? So I think Justin, I like his development. I think he brings some athleticism at that 4 or 5 spot. He's just got to get better defensively, and we just got to keep playing him until he does.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with the coach Brian Tonsoni and Andy Bottoms. So big picture, guys, I find myself, I'm obviously disappointed in the result tonight, because a winnable game was out there on the road. You make free throws, you make a few better decisions here or there, you're going to get this victory. And it really would have been nice to move to 6-3 with Purdue, Ohio State, and Michigan State coming up on the schedule now, because it's going to be hard to get another win for a while. Not that Indiana can't do it, because 2 of those are at home, but it certainly would have been nice to have this cushion to be up there, right there in 5th place in the Big Ten. But I'm having a hard time being too kind of distraught about this loss, because to me, when you look at it in the big picture, I think there are actually some things in this game that show positive trends for the program moving forward. Not in the micro sense that you miss free throws and the guards this year, aren't very good and will lead us to losses like this. But when you think about how many things went against Indiana tonight, having the one-day turnaround and you miss all those free throws and all these other things are going against you, and there you sit with a chance to win that game on the final possession, and you only lose by 2, because I feel like this is the type of game, especially when Indiana was down 8, late in the game, that they might not have battled back, and maybe they wouldn't have come out as well prepared early. So I think there were some signs from a coaching standpoint, and from just some of the things that Indiana did, that I actually take away as kind of a positive in a night that otherwise is a negative because you should have won the game. But I feel like maybe this is a half step back, a game like this, but in no means do I think this derails all the progress that we've been making, because it's tough to go on the road and win in the Big Ten. Indiana put themselves in a position to do it. They just didn't convert, but they put themselves in a position to do it. And I think that still qualifies as it. Again, it's not necessarily progress, but I just don't think it's a major step back or something to be, too alarmed by. Am I going too easy on him here, or do you kind of see the same thing? Go ahead,
Brian. No, go ahead, Brian.
I would say that there is a lot of progress being made in the Indiana University basketball program, and it's just going to take a lot of time, and we're going to have ups and downs this year. You might make the case where of the 14 teams in the Big Ten, we are in the bottom 2 or 3 roster-wise. If you look at, especially now with Duran injured, and I know other teams have injuries as well, but from just a standpoint, everyone on Twitter gets mad at Archie and this and that because Ohio State. Well, Ohio State has 3 kids that are really playing at a top level and a senior who moved in who's bringing that team together at the guard position. But so we're winning games against good teams, and you look, we're 6th in the Big Ten. There's a lot of teams that were predicted to be much better that are lower than Indiana. If you take a big picture look at it, we are in a better place than where Minnesota is, and maybe even better than a Northwestern, which this was their senior-laden year after going to the dance. So we're starting to play defense, and we're starting to take care of the ball better in general. Those are 2 things that are Archie Miller basketball that we didn't like about the previous. And you judge coaches not by wins and losses, and I know that the fans do, but you run it by the type of program. And I think that this program is headed in the right direction. I know I say this every time, I have a huge bias, but I like how we play in that first half. That's more of the style that we need to play consistently than the second half, and it was just a talent issue, physical issue second half.
Yep. Andy?
Yeah, it's hard because I think it's one of those where if you kind of step back and try to look at it, not in the context of how the last few games have gone and in the excitement of where things might be going and what could happen this year and potential of being 6-3 at the halfway point of the Big Ten season, and just kind of put it in the all right, what do we really expect out of this year based on the entire body of work that we've seen from this team? Kind of feels about right. I mean, this simply isn't a team that, no matter in Illinois, you can say that they obviously didn't have a Big Ten win coming into this game. They played a lot of teams tough. They were favored in the game. There's all those kinds of things. They're not as bad as their record would probably indicate. Now, I'm not saying that they're great, and certainly it was a game that IU, could have certainly won and would have been great to win. But this team isn't going to go run away and hide from anybody because they're just not good enough to really blow anybody out. And if you look down the Big Ten ledger, they had a great game against Northwestern, played probably their most complete game defensively of the entire season, and still only scored 66 points, I think. And so that was probably the anomaly. And this team's going to get in a lot of close games. And if you shoot yourselves in the foot in close games with not being able to make free throws and turning the ball over, then you certainly increase your odds of coming out on the wrong end of that. And so, it's certainly frustrating. And I was, frustrated when we got on here, but if you take a little bit of a step back and do that, I don't feel like it's moving the goalposts and saying, hey, this isn't what we would expect. It's a game they should have won. Make no mistake about it. They should have won the game. But in some ways I just don't really know how else to process it as step back and look at what we've seen from this team. Is it really shocking that they lost a game against a team like this? Probably not.
Okay, but more importantly, if Indiana sweeps Purdue, Ohio State, and Michigan State, are they on the bubble?
No.
I'm gonna deflect your question because I refuse to answer it. So I've got a more coaching related question for Brian. So I don't think anybody could argue. I'm gonna get back to the officiating because this is what Ryan would want. If I'm not going to talk about Trevor Hoffman, he would want me to circle back to the officiating. So from a coaching perspective, you see the game now in the second half being called what I would argue is completely differently than what the first half was called. What do you tell your team to do defensively and offensively?
Okay, that's a great question because in the Slack chat, I said we wanted a tightly called game because I thought Illinois would put more pressure on, and we play the pack line, and that would benefit us, and it ended up hurting us. And you've got to be able to move your feet defensively and not reach. And they put pressure at the elbow. They made a nice adjustment. Underwood's a good coach. They made a nice adjustment, and they were scissoring guys off the elbow into the post. And if it didn't get into the post, and they were swinging it for a ball screen at that very post going downhill. Most ball screens we see up high or on the wing. They were setting ball screens at the elbow, and that was a tough guard, and they did that after halftime. So you're trying as a coach to yell how to adjust to that on the fly. And the point is, when you have a veteran team, they're more likely to adjust on their own. When you have a first-year program and they all of a sudden this happens, and okay, Archie might have seen it on tape or whatever, but you're trying to yell out there. So I would have maybe tried to trap that, but that's a hard place to trap. But sometimes you get a bad officiating crew. We've had a few this year.
Sometimes.
Okay. A lot of times. We haven't been very happy in our high school games about some of the fouls that they seem to go one way. But here's the thing. When you're rebuilding and you have a team that doesn't have skill, you're going to be a step slow. And so I don't know how you fix it on the fly. I don't know how you fix it necessarily on the fly. Maybe you go to a zone defense, but we know that's not Archie. And that's not me. It would be maybe you go to a softer man-to-man so you don't get beat off the dribble. A sagging man-to-man is another option, but then people will hit threes on you. So it's a skill thing, and it's just beating your man to a spot, and we say guard your yard, and our guards didn't do it, and then it creates bad rotation. So, you got to adjust the officials some. It's really a difficult thing to do in a 20-minute segment of a game.
Yeah.
Harder than it seems for us fans to say, why don't you change this or do this? It's difficult.
All right, coming up in our final segment of this edition of the Assembly Call, we hand out our game balls. We look ahead to Indiana's next opponent, the Boilermakers, and then we deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's 73-71 loss to the Illinois Fighting Illini. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni, wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's 2-point loss to Illinois this evening. And it is time now to hand out our game balls. Let's go around the horn. Andy, we will start with you.
Well, I think hopefully one of us will give one to McRoberts. I thought he played well, but I seems easy to do. I mean, I think you just record me giving the game ball to Juwan Morgan and just play that essentially at every post.
We should just start calling this the Juwan Morgan game ball, and then we'll give it to somebody else, but it's named after him because he always gets it.
Yeah, or the game ball for somebody not named Juwan Morgan. Maybe we could just throw that in there. But but for now, I'm giving it to him. I mean, he was, really came out, was active at the beginning of the game, like you said, and was just everywhere, accounted for so many of those points. And really, when the game got away from IU, it was either in large part when he wasn't on the floor, although I know that stretch that you mentioned, where they rattled off 6 points when he was out was one where I was like, maybe they're going to be able to pull this off. That was kind of one of those moments. But by and large, they did not play well when he wasn't on the floor and when they didn't get him the ball. And I think, it just underscores how important he was to the team. But, 28 points, missed more from the free throw line than he did from the field. He was 12 of 14 from the field. So somebody questioned whether we had the option to just take the ball out of bounds when Illinois would foul. Perhaps that would have worked out a little bit better if we could have gone that route. But again, I thought he was really good. One of his better rebounding games recently with 9 rebounds and 3 assists. Second on the team in assists, continues to create opportunities for others by playing so well. So hard to go with anybody but him. But I think he and McRoberts both probably the two guys who were the most deserving tonight. Coach?
Well, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I'm going to give my game ball to Robert Finney, future point guard.
Man, if they could have slipped him out there tonight,
it's perfectly appropriate.
Okay, so I don't know. My salary for these is nil, so I don't risk much by taking a chance. But I saw him firsthand last Saturday in a game from the coaching sidelines, and Andy, we couldn't make adjustments on Finney, and they handed us a good whooping. But I think so. My game ball goes to him because I think he's going to be a typical point guard that understands offense and will get people into the offense and will be able to knock down shots. He has some areas that he needs to grow in physically to stop people and score in the lane strength-wise. But I liked his game, and I'm glad he's graduating so we don't have to play him anymore. And I will say that afterwards I sent something to Jared, and he sent this back, and I think it's really appropriate for Indiana and Indiana fans. And he was talking about our high school team, but I think it's really relevant. And he said, the future is bright. Once you get old, then stay old. Things will be better. In response to that, we're starting young, a Frosh, 2 softs, and a freshman off the bench. So 4 underclassmen in our starting lineup. He said that to me. It helped a little bit that night. But I think that's what I use in right now, too, is once we get players in, and we might get some 1 and dones or 2 and dones, but we're starting to get the program going. These kind of games will be won and won with a higher skill level and higher basketball IQ.
Yep. That's awesome, Coach. I figured you were going to go with McRoberts, and so I was really straining to figure out where I was going to go, and I was thinking up all the arguments for why I was going to give Devontae Green a game ball.
And really, we said we can more than one of us can pick the same one.
Well, I know, but
don't paint yourself into a corner.
No, I know, but I mean, I think there were. I mean, look, I'm not saying Devontae was great, but given that no one else could really do anything against the pressure, you have to kind of take some of the mistakes that he made, and he did some good things. So this was not. An awful Devontae Green performance, 8 points, 5 assists. But I will go with McRoberts. I think he's got to look for his shot like he did tonight. Now, he took that one kind of wild shot where he got the rebound, kind of drove all the way, and it came the possession after Devontae Green had kind of taken a wild shot. So I'm thinking, don't let Devontae rub off on Zach McRoberts. That needs to go in the other direction. But it was kind of nice to see Zach force a shot. Like, I don't mind it if he forces a shot every now and then, because him just being seen as a credible threat and going 2 for 4 from downtown, that makes you a credible threat. He's going to be playing 30-plus minutes. It can't be where his defender just totally sags off. And so I think putting what he put tonight on film, I mean, the rebounds, we know all about that, but him getting 10 points, knocking down a couple of those shots, I think it was really important for Indiana getting off to a good start. We talked about what his limitations are offensively, and so he needs other guys to be creating the opportunities for him, like Juwan did with a couple of those passes early. But I thought he really stepped up and provided some offense on a night when Indiana needed it. So once again, Zach McRoberts doing the little things, and tonight some of the big things to help put his team in a position to win. Unfortunately, Indiana just wasn't able to do that. Andy, this is typically the spot in the night when we preview Indiana's upcoming opponent. We do have a show coming up tomorrow, Assembly Call Radio tomorrow, as this crazy schedule continues. So because it's so late, let's not spend too much time on it, but you want to give us just a quick minute about Purdue, which is coming into town on Sunday, and kind of preview your more detailed preview that'll come tomorrow?
I would suggest people not think about this game until 3:29 on Sunday afternoon. That's probably the best advice that I can give. Purdue is, I mean, they're in the top 5 in both offensive and defensive efficiency, so that really bodes well. IU also similarly ranked in both. Unfortunately, they're 106th versus 109th as opposed to 3rd versus 4th.
By the way, I looked, and I think 5 of the last 6 teams that have finished a season in the top 5 of both offense and defensive efficiency have won the national championship. So, I mean, Purdue is now who knows if they can actually finish there this year. And some people will say, they haven't played a great schedule in terms of playing top 15 or top 10 teams. That, if that's your one quibble with them, that shows you, I mean, I hate them, but they are really good.
Yeah, no, they're extremely good. A veteran, you talk about the get old, stay old. This is the picture of a team like that with all the experience they have. So it will going to need a lot of Assembly Hall magic for sure in that game. And in some ways, this is the kind of game where IU teams, when you least expect it, have come around and been more competitive than you might expect. But it is a truly tall challenge for IU going into that game. There are not a lot of chinks in the armor for Purdue at this point, but based on what they do. They're also, just to give everybody a couple of nightmares for those of you watching live, for all IU's woes at defending the 3-point shot, Purdue first in the nation in 3-point shooting. So yeah, it definitely a tall order. I would come in with relatively low expectations to the game, and as I suggested, do not think about this game until 3:29 on Sunday afternoon.
How's their free throw defense, though? Because that's really been the challenge for us. How are they defending free throws?
Let's see. Not bad. 47th. 47th as of now. So I got that going for him.
Okay. Well, you're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off of your entire order at HoosierProud.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts, or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com and use the promo code Assembly at checkout. That's HoosierProud.com, promo code Assembly for 15% off your entire order. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms, the coach, Brian Tonsoni. We are wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's loss to Illinois. Gentlemen, it is time for last call, our closing statements on this Indiana defeat. And Coach, we will go to you first for closing statements.
Yeah, you just got to try to stay positive in a first year of a new coach. I know it's difficult, but this team is showing some strides in certain areas. It's winning some games like the Maryland game and the complete game against Northwestern, and we'll have a few more of those, and we might surprise someone that we're not supposed to beat. And my suggestion is just, wash off whatever feelings you have from game to game and go into it with a brand new thought and not look ahead to what place we're in the Big Ten or what the record's going to be. This is a growing year, and I think we'll find ourselves happy at the end of the year that we got through this and look forward to things to come. But stay positive. You're here watching this show and listening because you love IU basketball, and it's coming back to the way it was when we all fell in love with it, and it'll get there sooner than later.
Mm-hmm. So, Andy, seriously, for your last call, like if we beat Michigan State, Ohio State, and Purdue, are we on the bubble?
There's a whole lot of crazy things that are going to be happening if those three things occur.
I want to know.
I rule out nothing if those three things happen. Yeah. Oh boy.
It's late, man. It's late.
I guess it really is. Yeah, I'm really glad the game could start late and then get drug out by
a foul shooting contest. Yeah.
By 30 plus fouls in the second half. Yeah, that's outstanding. Now, I would kind of echo what Brian said. It's one of those where like you don't want to let yourself get reeled into thinking that things might be better than you expected them to be. And this was kind of like the reality check that got you back to like, you know what? There's going to be some highs for this team, and they're going to show progress. But at its core, there are flaws on the roster. There are deficiencies on the team. When you look at conference shooting numbers, they're 9th in 2-point percentage for as well as they've shot twos in so many games in conference games, 9th in 2-point percentage, 11th in 3-point percentage, 14th in free throw percentage. There's no margin for error when you're playing that way offensively, and that margin for error gets completely blown out of the water when you turn the ball over as much as IU did tonight and you miss as many free throws as they did. It just it is a hard one to swallow because in spite of all those things, they were able to win. And that was, kind of one of the points I made in the Maryland game when I wrote the email after it. And thankfully I don't have to write this one. So good luck with that. But, IU won in spite of some things that they wouldn't have won in spite of in years past. And today they almost won in spite of things that they wouldn't have won in spite of in years past. And so if you want to, take the glass half full approach, you kind of look at it that way. If you want to take the glass half empty, you feel like it's the same old thing that's happened over and over again. But, I thought what Brian said, just enjoying watching the way that Juwan Morgan and Zach McRoberts are playing. The way he started is probably the best way to finish because Juwan Morgan is so much fun to watch right now to see how much he's grown and how much he has on his plate. And it just doesn't faze him, and the injury doesn't faze him. And he comes out, 2 days after playing 36 minutes on a bum ankle and looked like there were 4 of them on the court at the beginning of the game. The enduring memories of this season will likely be, this is kind of where things got started for Archie Miller and probably how well Juwan Morgan played. And if anything more happens than that, then so be it. But, maybe because it's 12:30 here, that's what I'm going to try to think of as I attempt to get some rest before I have to go to work tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or today, as the case may be.
Perspective is so important, and it can be a difficult challenge, coming on here in these post-game shows and reacting immediately after a game. The focus is on what just happened in that game. So it's so important, I feel like, for us to remember to take a step back and look at things in the macro sense as well. And if you look at when Big Ten play resumed back on January 2nd, if you had told us that 4 of Indiana's games over the next, how many have we played, over the next 7 games would come down to 4 points or less, and we're going to win 3 of them, everybody would have taken that right then and there. We would have said, yes, let's take that. And some things have really went Indiana's way in beating Minnesota and in beating Penn State and in beating Maryland. And tonight, some of those things didn't go Indiana's way, but if everything else is the same in this game and Indiana just makes 3 more free throws, if Juwan Morgan is 6 for 8 from the line instead of 3 for 8 from the line, then our entire perception of this game is colored differently. And so I just think that we need to keep that in mind and make sure that, just because Indiana lost, and yes, it was a disappointing loss, like let's acknowledge all of the reasons why that happened and acknowledge the limitations, and probably use this loss as just a reminder that, okay, maybe this team's not going to go 15-3 in the conference or win 12 or 13 conference games. Yeah, that's probably not going to happen, because when you're playing this many close games, you're going to win some and you're going to lose some of them. And tonight, Indiana was on the losing end, but on balance, I still think that the direction is positive and progress is being made. And so I'll go to bed disappointed tonight, as I think all Indiana fans will, but not with some feeling, again, that the progress Indiana has making has been derailed. I think there were still some positive signs. And I think the games as we move forward, where we get good play from the guards, we're gonna be able to win those games against teams where we're evenly matched. And the games where we don't get good play from the guards, we're going to lose those games. But this is the first season in what is hopefully going to be a very long and fruitful tenure under Archie Miller. And I still think, on balance, things are going well enough for me to still feel really positive, and that doesn't change after a loss, even one as disappointing as tonight's. All right, well, that will do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that our live broadcasts immediately following every IU game are always available on our homepage at assemblycall.com and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And you can always catch up on demand anytime with our podcast. Just search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, go to assemblycall.com/join to join our free email newsletter. You'll get our 6-banner Sunday news roundups and our post-game analysis emails sent the morning after every game, which I am getting ready to go right now. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again Thursday night for Assembly Call Radio, and then again on Sunday for the IU Purdue post-game show. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.